Sierra Leone decides 2023. In this election season, Sierra Leoneans have witnessed possibly an unprecedented level of party resignations in the National Grand Coalition. 7 in a day, with the possibility of ending up in defections. The NGC is facing rapid meltdown as some of its founding members tendered their resignation from the party. The NGC positioned itself as Sierra Leone's new third political force when it won 5 parliamentary seats at the 2018 elections, including its presidential candidate for the 2018 elections, Honorable Dr. Kande Kole Yumkela. The state of affairs dictates that the National Grand Coalition Party is anything but a grand coalition, with many unanswered questions about its future and survival ahead of the June 24th elections. A leaked video and audio recordings of Dr. Yumkela speaking to the party's National Executive Council angrily, the most powerful organ in the party, questions the well-being of the NGC, especially him indicating he is leaving NGC to pursue his political dream with the ruling Sierra Leone People's Party after a long courtship with the SLPP leader and president of the Republic of Sierra Leone, Julius Maada Bio. Now, many have attributed the seeming demise of the NGC to the leaked audio of Dr. Yumkela. Tonight, we are taking a deep dive into the seeming debacle of the National Grand Coalition. My name is Samuel Wise-Bangre, and this is AYV on Sunday. But following the violent protests on August 10th this year, President Julius Maada Bio for the two giants, APC and SLPP.
There are no protests in all the parts of the country, including
tormenting Liberia, and now he finds the back of the net.
And one honorable member, board of directors.
Very good evening and a warm welcome to AYV on Sunday. Hi, good evening and a very warm welcome to AYV on Sunday on channel 33 on TV, on DSTV channel 399, on radio FM 101.7 and on all our different social media handles, especially the AYV News Facebook page. Tonight, we shall be discussing the survival and leadership crisis and future of the National Grand Coalition. Here with me, as always, I have a star-studded panel to help me unpack the conversation. As always, I have a political economist, Cyril Django. Cyril, good evening and welcome to AYV on Sunday.
Samuel, and good evening to the viewers out there.
I don't know when it stops to say Happy New Year, but this is our first meet since 2023. So Happy New Year to you, Cyril.
Thank you very much, Samuel.
All right, I have Jimmy Kande. Jimmy Kande is a professor emeritus at the University of Richmond in Virginia, United States. And he's currently serving as a professor of political science at Furabe College, one of the 3 constituent colleges of the University of Sierra Leone. Good evening, Jimmy, and welcome to AYV on Sunday.
Yeah, good evening.
All right, I have Melvin Tijan Mansare, a senior parliamentary correspondent, not just in Sierra Leone, Africa, but also a political analyst. Melvin, good evening and welcome to
Thank you very much for having me.
AYV on Sunday.
Viewers.
All right, online on Zoom, we have the Deputy National Chairman and leader of the National Grand Coalition, Jesmed Suma. But when we establish a clear line with him, we shall bring him on the show to be part of the conversation. But do not hesitate. As always, we admonish you. We solicit your views. Share them with us on the AYV News Facebook page. We would always find time to go through some of them because time will never permit us to go through all of them here on the show. I'm going to start off with you, Cyril, for obvious reasons. The National Grand Coalition, it's brought fresh air to the political space. When it was registered in 2017, and of course, the 2018 elections, we saw a mix. For a point in our parliament, it's very colorful with the presence of the National Grand Coalition. You contested for the mayoral seat under this very party, the National Grand Coalition. With what is currently happening in the NGC, what will be or how would you paint the picture of current happenings in the NGC with 7 resignations? So
well, I do not see myself speaking for the NGC, but I can give you my own analysis of what's happening in the NGC. You know, the NGC, if we're going back to 2017, has been a party of diasporans who were fed up with the GOPs, the grand old parties, that is the governing party now and the main opposition. And so they coalesced into forming an NGC even before they got a leader, you know. And at that time, there was this fracas and this division between Kande Yomkela's side and the then flag bearer to be Julius Maada Bio, such that there were camps, because, you know, in any political party, there are established camps. And what we saw was a very dominant camp that they call the Paupa camp, you know, slugging it out with a man who was just arrived fresh from the diaspora, bristling with ideas, with solutions. But then we saw that the Paupa camp was very strong enough. In fact, they were so powerful that they could hold hostage an entire party building. They could even choose who and who can enter. But then we gradually saw that the fighting was being lost by Dr. Kande Yomkela. And there was this disgruntlement that the party itself had leaders who were determined to ensure that their own man, then Mr. Maada Bio, become the flag bearer. And there was a disgruntled Dr. Kande Yomkela who said, enough is enough. And there was also a party set up looking for somebody to snatch up to be their leader. And so Dr. Kande Yomkela married, you would say, the NGC and became its flag bearer. But then when I went to the NGC then, I was looking for a radical shift, you know, because even me was tired with the grand old parties which we perceived as corrupt. And so that optimism led me to the party. But let me tell you my own story there. When I joined that party, I was contesting for mayorship, and I had a lot of momentum. You know, I was here, I was in all place. I mean, but monkey and not the left. I mean, in black and in the left arm.
What does that mean?
It means we were called to a meeting by the chairman and other dignitaries to say to me, say kindly, can you allow one Mr. Samuel to become the mayor? And I was just shocked.
You were asked to step down.
Yes.
From the race.
And I was shocked. I thought there could be a primary, you know, based on the momentum we've gathered, you know, and the foresights that I also share with the leadership. I think there should be a primary. But then they prevailed on me. That was a very bad signal for me at the NGC. And that led to me becoming disgruntled, so to say, well, not much interest again in this party. So what we see now is a party that may not win the substantial 13 or so % in the PR system. Well, there could be some analysts there who could have thought that, well, is it possible for us to be winning any marginal number of votes to garner support in the PR system? They could have surmised that, well, it's not possible for the agency to be stronger like it was in 2018.
Why is that?
Well,
what are the factors?
The Sierra Leonean mindset, Samuel, is fixed on the two parties. And the agency is described as wasted votes. So that entrenched nature of the two parties could have led for some inside deep thinking. And for me, it was ultimate that Dr. Kande Yomkela would have made a choice between seeing the annihilation of his party, standing up front and alone, and fighting these two strong parties. So when I was hearing the rumor that Dr. Kanda Yomkela was having a honeymoon, with Dr. Mada Bio. I think he was invited, to Bonfosu, where we saw the happy mood between them. We had suspicion. We had different people interpreting this meetup. Gradually, we saw a Kanda Yomkela taking a stand in just 1 week, February 28th to 1st January 28th to 1st of February, things happened. In a week, we saw Kanda Yomkela standing up and taking a side because he was seemingly driving aimlessly the NGC train. But then he said...
Aimlessly in what sense?
Well, in the sense that there has been speculations which he had not addressed about whether he was going to move to the SLPP or still stand under the agency.
Did you see that coming? Dr. Yomkela's move to the SLPP. I mean, in what he has tagged as compact inclusive governance. Of course, we know Dr. Yomkela for bringing, some good slogans in the political arena. It was for strategic alliance. Then we saw how the consortium of progressive political parties came about. But now, I think about a week ago, I saw Dr. Yomkela talking about compact inclusive governance, which... but did you see this coming? You mentioned when he came to contest for the SLPP's standard bearer post. We knew what that was going to, and at the end of the day, he backed off. He said he was not going to the SLPP again because for him, like you mentioned, there was this fresh thoughts, this fresh thinking of him coming with all of the exposure, the experiences he has gotten from the international scene that, the Sierra Leonean politics needed at the time. So he departed, went to the National Grand Coalition, which, by the way, many have submitted that it was strategic with the KKY movement translating into the National Grand Coalition party. So it was premeditated. Of course, he wanted, but then he had a plan B if the SLPP did not give him a chance then. And so he got that. It came back now. Looking at all what is happening with the speculations that, hey, Dr. Kanda Yomkela is going back to the SLPP, especially after the president and the leader of the SLPP said, come back home. This is home for you. But you see our old word. Since the old word, what we saw, in terms of public statement, or what we got in terms of public statement was that leaked audio where he was angrily addressing the highest organ of the NGC. Did that come as a surprise?
That for me was the biggest surprise. In other words, here was a man who was determined now to take a stand on the issue itself. He has been dilly-dallying on the issue, but there has been wild speculations that he could move to the Grand Old SLPP party. Now, when he declared, he said forcefully that those who want to go with him can go with him. That sounded a major death knell for the party. And Kanda Yomkela's move, for me, was expected because the NGC has not been able to make the traction in the last 4.5 years while in Parliament.
Does that not beg the question of what was Dr. Yomkela's, aim coming into politics? Was it to bring change, or was his aim to just gain the political power? Because he knew that leaving the SLPP was going to be a daunting task for him winning the presidency. But then he left anyway. Yeah. So is it the presidency or the political power was his ambition, or he wanted to bring change? What was,
Samuel, you've captured exactly the problem right now. Those who have been resigning in the party were thinking this is going to be a long-term venture. But I'm thinking for Dr. Kanda Yomkela.
Go ahead.
He has a vision for this country. It could have achieved that had there not been any Dr. Julius Maada Bio at that time. Now, he wants to be a leader. 5 years in the wilderness, he's learned a lot of things. This is a man who gave up his American passport, mind you, to hopefully become president under the NGC. That's a major sacrifice. But then, looking at things on the ground, Samuel, you will see that Sierra Leonean, the mindset, is determined between two parties. And I think this man had realized, then let me make one point clear. We are yet to hear him resign from the NGC.
Right.
So we are going to see something like this. He is going to align with President Maada Bio, whilst claiming to still be the NGC.
Because I was going to ask if you think you were going to expect him resigning from the NGC, especially looking at his reputation and how he would want to guide and guard his reputation in politics. But let me quickly bring in Professor Kande. Prof, what have you been able to get from what is happening currently in the political arena with Dr. Kande Yumkela coming out making that statement angrily? And now many said, oh, because of that statement, that, I mean, you are, whether or not you're happy with me being seen with the president and all of that, for me, I've always preached strategic alliance, the politics of inclusion, how do we change the narrative in governance? And so immediately after that, we saw resignations, about 7 of them in a day, from the party. What would you make of that?
I think what I have to say here will be said from an academic perspective. I've known Kande Yumkela for a very long time. I consider him a friend of mine.
Right.
I voted for him. I was never a member of the NGC, so I really don't know about the internal workings of the NGC. And what I want to speak to is the issue of what does the implosion of the NGC tell us about politics and society in Sierra Leone. I think that's a broader, larger question.
Just put that into context for us.
We can address. What does it tell us about politics and society in Sierra Leone? There are many points I will try to hit on. First of all, as my friend here just pointed out, about how entrenched these two parties are, that we have an entrenched duopoly, what another friend characterized as a resilient duopoly. Basically, these two parties dominate the political landscape. And they pretty much informally work, they feed off each other, and they almost informally work together to prevent any third party from actually taking center stage or becoming more competitive. We all saw that in the last election. You know, there was widespread rigging. I think one party out-rigged the other. And the NGC accepted the results, I believe, prematurely. Because there was, particularly in the western area, I was here for the election, but I will not even get into that. So that entrenched duopoly makes it very difficult for third parties to have any traction. You look at the history of third parties, you know, in the last couple decades, you know, these third parties also are weakened by the fact, including the NGC, that they end up being personalist outfits. That was true of the UNPP, of Dr. Karifa Smart. It was true of PDP Sobe, and it was also true for NGC. I have supported Yumkela. I wasn't really convinced about the NGC as a political party, because even between the elections, that's when you really gain traction. That's when you get down to the trenches and do some party building. And none of these parties are interested in party building. You get to the grassroots, you identify with the needs of the people and try to formulate with the people solutions to their problems. So you work with them not just when election is around the corner, but throughout the inter-election period. And the NGC failed in that. And as a result, you began to feel that the party lacked direction. Because one of the problems in our country is that the differences between our political parties are not ideological. They're not programmatic.
Just quickly, Prof.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you there. You followed Dr. Yumkela, like you just mentioned your friends.
Yes.
So just before the transformation of the Kandekole Yumkela movement, the KKY movement, to the National Grand Coalition, I mean, a movement becoming a political party.
Yeah.
So at the movement level, was there any strategic thinking in by the party or the movement itself to get itself entrenched? I mean, understanding the political dynamics of Sierra Leone before its transformation to a political party, to have gotten a fair idea of what, he was coming into.
I think the problem was that KKY was being pulled in all kinds of different directions by some old crony politicians. You know, some had already been in the system. You got to remember, the NGC was a party of disgruntled elements from both the SLPP and the APC. And the reason why they may have been disgruntled may have been legitimate, you know, for some. But you got to remember, it will always be easier for them to go back, just as it was easy for UNPP guys to go back to APC or for PDP Sobe to go back to APC. So the NGC was always a mixed bag. You know, the unifying force there was KKY. But KKY's vision was about country first, putting your country first. In terms of a real clear-cut programmatic kind of blueprint for transforming the country, because really what we need here are not piecemeal changes. We need a complete overhaul. But you got to remember where it's coming from, the UN system. They move incrementally. They don't move radically. So when they seek change, they bring it about at the margins. They don't go at it, you know, full-throated and try to just overhaul the system. Well, let me just get back to some of the points I was making about the entrenched duopoly and the third-party history in this country. And also, I think important is the opportunism of politicians, the rank opportunism of politicians. I remember I was here for the last election. The results had hardly been declared, and I think one of the NGC leaders in the Western area immediately declared for the SLPP. He said something to the effect that he did not spend 10 years in opposition to continue spending another 5 years in opposition. So he was basically, most of these folks end up being in it for themselves.
Right.
Whether it's at the top or at the bottom. Yes, they may use power to further the interests of the country, but most of them, you know, they get into politics not to right the wrongs of our country, but to build up their own, not just political capital, but their financial and material capital. And I think the writing was on the wall for the NGC.
How so?
Because it lacked traction. It was not going to do as well in this election as it did in the last election, which I didn't think it did that well, but I think it got, 6% or 6.9% of the popular vote, and I don't think it will have, you know, gotten that much in this, in this election. And the PR system also may somewhat create more problems for the NGC because you have to meet a particular threshold. And the problem with the PR is that it's going to further strengthen, because the idea is that PR will allow minority parties to get in, but it's going to strengthen this duopoly. It's going to be a patronage system because it's a closed list PR. It's not an open list PR. Brazil has an open list PR where you indicate your vote not just for the party, but also for a candidate. So like the SLPP APC will have a list of candidates, and whichever candidate is the top vote getter in that district or constituency is the one the party will be forced to select. The party will not be the one deciding who the representatives will be. And in this system, it really undermines, you know, the vertical accountability of the representatives to their constituents, while weakening the horizontal accountability as well, because Parliament is going to be further weakened because those who are now going to Parliament are beholden to the party bosses, no longer to the constituents. So that in itself will make it even harder for a party like the NGC, because the idea, the theory behind the PR system is that it will allow fringe parties, minority parties, to have a chance at being represented, but not the way the closed party system is, not the way the entrenched kind of system, you know, is, because the two-party system has not worked for us in this country.
Do you believe that the NGC itself, you know, I've spoken with Dr. Kande Yumkela on several occasions. Very recently I spoke with the the outgone national chairman, Dr. Dennis Bright, and I asked him whether or not Dr. Yumkela would be the face for the party in the June 24th elections. And for him, it was a matter of wait and see, because they've not gotten to that point yet where the party would bring, people who would want to be its flag bearer. So the question I want to ask, did you see the NGC consolidating itself? You spoke about the personalist outfit. Did you see the NGC consolidating itself around Dr. Kande Yumkela? And when there is no Dr. Yumkela, there is no NGC.
Well, that's what happens with personalist parties. It was the glue, more or less. But even before he declared that he was leaving the party, a lot of people were already, the party was hemorrhaging, no question about that. So, his decision to leave, I think it's up to him. People are giving him a lot of grief.
We've been trying to get him, and we'll continue to try to reach him. But just quickly, let me see if we've established link there with the party's deputy national leader and chairman, Jesmed Suma. Jesmed, good evening and welcome to AYV on Sunday.
Good evening, fellow Sierra Leoneans, and thank you for having me on AYV. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Stay there with us. I'll come to you shortly, Jesmed. Let me quickly bring in Melvin. Melvin, let's get to talk about, I know we've been having these conversations every now and then. And last week or so, you were here on our breakfast show discussing especially the leaked audio of Dr. Yumkela and where that would put the NGC. Now we've seen 7 people have resigned from the party. What does that say of the future of the party?
That the party is grappling with what I would call a serious ideological indifference between the Kande Yumkela factor and the Dr. Bright factor. And that can be deduced from just reading the resignation letters of Dr. Bright, people like Ato Pierce and others. And the bottom line there is, they are saying they've not seen the change that they were expecting to see for them to be encouraged to join in. So that is the fundamental disagreement. And if you read through the Salon Force publication on the 31st of January, it was very clearly stated that there was a disagreement when they arrived at a situation wherein Dr. Yumkela was to lead a team of negotiators to discuss this issue. It's still my belief that the negotiations are ongoing, and for Dr. Bright and others to resign, for me, I think it's quite significant, but rather untimely, because for me, I look forward to the negotiations, what were the outcomes, if there was going to be a report, what is contained in this report, see some facts, but in the middle of the process, backing out shows nothing but serious indifferences that cannot be mended within
there have been reports, I'll tell you, there have been reports when the party's NEC, when they have meetings, there have been incidents of violence, amongst members, beating members and all of that. And, well, to a point that accusations have been pointing at bodyguards of Dr. Yumkela beating people in, and even the Western chairman who just resigned. I was told by a party member that, he's been attacked, people have been slapped during meetings and all of that, amongst themselves. So what does that tell you of the negotiations you think, you believe that are ongoing and you think would resolve to anything strategic for the party?
Fundamental mistrust. And that mistrust will not be different from the fact that many of those followers at first saw Dr. Yumkela as a reformer. Along the line, he's still serving time in parliament, he's dubbed a centrist. And for him to all of a sudden become a conformist, it's significantly ideological. And you are going to have people who always want to see him as that centrist figure in the political body, other people who want to see him as that reformist figure. And now how they are coming into terms of, well, should it be the case that Honorable Yumkela comes public to say, I'm going back to my roots, how will they be reconciled all these indifferences? I think there should have been much more internal negotiations around these things before they've gone public the way they've done now.
Let's look at the track the tracks that Dr. Yumkela have laid since he made a decision to come back to come to politics and run for the office of the president. I mean, when he joined the SLPP, I mean, many have said Dr. Yumkela is very good at mobilizing. He then brought about the initiative of having, an association of aspiring flag bearers in the SLPP, and the only candidate who was never part of that association is now the President of the Republic of Sierra Leone. I mean, all the others were in that association except him. And at the end of the day, we saw where that led. One of the flag bearers becoming the campaign manager for Dr. Julius Maada Bio when he was candidate, Dr. Ali Kaba. And Dr. Yumkela left, formed the National Grand Coalition with a new concept of strategic alliance. I mean, bringing people from whether PCS, SLPP, every other political party, but you have the ideology of putting Salone first. And so it was, but that didn't work. So he thought, okay, let's mobilize around opposition political parties. Let's see if we can actually coalesce for the purposes of creating change and making that. And so the Consortium of Progressive Political Parties was formed. And in one of their programs here on AYV, they have a paid for arts. And Dr. Yumkela was very happy about that initiative of the Consortium of Progressive Political Parties and all of that. I always see Dr. Yumkela talking about compact inclusive governance, when he's been accused of being in bed with the SLPP already. Now, with all of these things, do you see reliability? I mean, the issue of, I know in politics, when you talk about character, competence, and capacity, do we have them in what is actually happening right now in the NGC, especially with the face of the party?
I think that is very important also, especially when Dr. Yumkela himself campaigned on the mantra of change. And if you've been changed, of course, and calling them all sorts of names. And if you've been changed by the change you are purporting, it begs the question, what's your political relevance? And I think that's what Dr. Yumkela is grappling. He wants to stay relevant in the political stage. But he should be counting the cost as to the risk he's about to take and what will be the cost attached to it. Of course, it's going to be a huge political risk, because even if he's to go over back to the SLPP, it's good you mentioned the Bio factor. Let's not lose sight of the fact that President Bio has made several overtures, very unlikely of him in the first place, to get Dr. Yumkela back. But some of us have been asking, what has changed within the SLPP to entice Dr. Yumkela to return with his NGC? And if you look at Dr. Bright and others, this is what they are asking. But I don't think it's a mere accident of what is happening. They are invisible hands. We can easily tell that the pressure from President Bio has ignited all of this in the NGC.
Pressure in what sense?
In just to canvass and lobby Dr. Yumkela back. We saw what happened in Kishom. We saw what happened in Banff. We've been seeing the trend. So, I mean...
that is a strategy for him to up his political capital.
Of course, and he's making advances at him to bring him back. So what we don't know yet is what he's been bargaining.
As you say that, that begs the question, because I've also had, that Dr. Yumkela and few other members of the NGC have met with President Bio. Negotiating that, oh, Mr. President, I'm not going to come, leaving or resigning from the NGC, because that's definitely going to dent my political career or ambition. But let's have some form of partnership. Let's have some compensation, if that's the word, for the NGC, if at all we're going forward with this. That begs the question to Jasmed Suma, who is the Deputy National Chairman and leader of the National Grand Coalition. Jasmed, what is happening with the NGC? It's Dr. Yumkela NGC, in the sense that without him there will be no NGC?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before I respond to your question, I want to take exception to the topic of discussion. NGC is not battling survival. NGC does not have leadership crisis. If we had leadership crisis, I will not be here. But we already have a very well-built structure within our party. We are not fighting for survival because other than APC and SLPP, NGC as a party has over 10,800 executives elected across the nation in each of the 446 wards, in each of the 132 constituencies, and each of the 8 regions. Because we have 8 regions, we have executive, and each body is about a minimum of 18 executive members. That's not a party that is struggling for survival. In terms of membership, we have registered members, over 380,000 across the nation. We are using metrics to manage the internal structures of our party. We're not just going to follow or rely on party supporters in rallies and as we've been doing in the past, like in 2018. We have metrics. We have people registering and paying for registration fees for the National Grand Coalition. That's not a party that is struggling for survival. So that narrative, let's put that on the side. On the issue of Dr. Kande Kola-Yumukela, he is the first that will tell you that he is known for building institutions. And he has always informed us, his followers, that we should always make sure we build the NGC as an independent institution with or without him that should be able to survive on its own. And that is exactly where we are getting at. NGC is capable of surviving on its own.
So
the third point I want to make, Dr. Kande Kola-Yumukela never said
just before you get on
he is resigning from politics. He just said that one of the options that he was considering is to resign from politics. He did not say, I have resigned from politics. Secondly, I want the nation to know, Dr. Kande Kola-Yumukela has not joined the SLPP. No, he never said he's going to join the next SLPP. No, Dr. Kande Kola-Yumukela is an integral part of the National Grand Coalition. He is the head of the Elders Council. He is the parliamentary leader of the NGC party. In terms of his meetings with the president, be he a politician or not, he is a nation-building person. He focuses on national development. In his outside private life, he has done that for all nations. He has met with all different types of presidents. President of the United States, UK, Europe, America, everywhere of the world. So why will he not be able to meet with his own president in his own country? That is another point. The final point, before you go ask the next question. The final point before you ask the next question.
Two paragraphs from the resignation of Arthur Pierce, who was the Western Region chairman for the party, refuting the allegation of, battle for survival or leadership crisis. Now, he says, in his own words, the reasons for this decision is no way stem from grudge or malice, but from personal and professional values which I have held in high esteem throughout my years in politics. I strongly believe that an alliance or political partnership with the Sierra Leone People's Party at this particular time will kill public trust and respect that has long been elements of admiration for the NGC, and there is a great possibility of such agreement to put an end to the sustainability of the NGC after the June 24th multi-tier elections. So saying the party does not have leadership crisis, with many of those who were voted in as leaders for the party in your just concluded National Convention resigning. Dr. Dennis Bright, National Chairman, resigned. The Western Region Chairman just resigned. The Deputy Secretary General just resigned. Arun Subaru, who was, putting out his face for the mayoral seat for the NGC, just resigned. Alan Bork just resigned. So, Alan Duke, sorry. You have 7 people who have resigned, including some of
not 7, 4 people. 4 people.
So let's get to it, Jasmine.
Let me respond to Arthur Pierce's
Go ahead.
Perception. That is his own perception. Everybody has their own individual way of interpreting their own values or principles. To me, it is lack of understanding of what we actually mean by the National Grand Coalition. Because for you to be able to pursue the principles and values of the party, you have to understand from where it is rooted from. When we talk about a coalition, we are not talking about NGC merging into another political party. That's not what coalition is. We are not disappearing into another political party. When we talk about coalition, just from its inception, it's a coalition of progressives, people that have like minds, that come together from different political parties and including different organizations. And in this case, when we talk about a coalition or an alliance or strategic alliance, is one in which the two parties will discuss about the establishment of a common government in which representatives from both parties will be part of that government to develop the nation. Development is the focus. Now, some people may take exception to us having a coalition with one party or the other. But guess what? The time we came together under COP, these same people that are now criticizing an alliance with SLPP were the one rooting for that concept of COP coming together with APC, which we didn't have any exception to, we didn't have any problem with. But you cannot go into a coalition or an alliance with an institution that is not prepared to go into a coalition with you. Secondly, the state of the nation is such that NGC is the only guarantor of peace. As you all know, the nation is divided by region, by tribe, and by party. Right now, the folks in APC, they are bitter, they are bloody. If they take power in that country,
and when you say the NGC is the only guarantor of peace, what does that mean? Because we've, political pundits, analysts, commentators, they've always attributed what is happening in Sierra Leone along political lines to the SLPP and the APC. You were in bed with the SLPP.
Let me explain what that means.
I'm coming. You were in bed with the APC under the consortium of progressive political parties. That has changed. Now you are moving to the SLPP under what you've just referred to as strategic alliance or partnership. Now, what's changed from that concept of forming a consortium or coalition with opposition political parties to now the ruling party? What's changed?
Okay, first of all, COP was not a coalition. It was not an alliance. COP was a group of political parties in opposition that realized that when the ruling government does anything that affects the lives, the stability, and the constitution of our nation, each political party criticizes that action independently. And the ruling government just laugh at us because that individual criticism had no weight until the idea came up for us to bring all the oppositions together, spearheaded by our great chairman and leader, Dr. Dennis Bright, that led to the formation of COP. So COP was not a coalition. COP was a collection of political parties in opposition so that we can speak from a common voice, take a common position on issues that affect the nation in opposition to the ruling government. There are people who were very admirable of the success of COP that started talking about the idea of promoting this common understanding into the formation of an alliance. But it had never reached that level wherein we could begin the discussion of the formation of an alliance. Now, with respect to the discussion we are having with the ruling government, the president, in his own wisdom, I know some people may take exception to that comment, saw it necessary to reach out to at least one or two opposition parties and begin to discuss about the future of the nation in terms of how to make amends or how to correct the mistakes that they've made over the past for 5 years. And I don't see anything wrong with that. And everybody knows that our leader, Dr. Kande Koleyo-Munkela, from day one, has been the one preaching.
The president of the Republic of Sierra Leone reached out to Dr. Kande Koleyo-Munkela in Gambia, asking him to come back home. And Dr. Munkela told the president our whole word. Now, I'll tell you for a certain, I have an agreement with Dr. Munkela that every February, he has to speak to the nation through me because, I mean, he has to assess governance, the way the country has been run and all of that. In 2021, we did not, meet. We did not have that. Made a couple of arrangements. Well, since the statement was made about him, the whole world, we've not gotten a statement because there is also the speculation of bringing Dr. Munkela to be running mate to Dr. Julius Maada Bio in the June 24th elections this year. Is that also on the table for the NGC? Is that part of the package?
Now, let me speak to the issue about whole world. You see, Dr. Kande Koleyo-Munkela, by his nature, is a diplomat. By his nature, he's not the kind of rare boy politicians that people are looking forward to. No, he's not that type of politician. He's a diplomat. He respects institutions and respects the presidency, irrespective of who occupies it. So when he's speaking to the presidency of the nation, he has to speak with respect. And that is why he said our own word. But eventually it became done on everybody that Dr. Kande Koleyo-Munkela is not prepared to go back to the SLPP. No, he's not going to abandon all the thousands and hundreds of thousands of followers that he have in Sierra Leone and around the world and just abandon us and then go to the SLPP. No. Now he is now in the process of, in the interest of Sierra Leone and the future and development of the nation, discussing with the president in terms of how to move the nation forward. Now, in terms of the comment I made with respect to peace, everybody in Sierra Leone knows Dr. Kande Koleyo-Munkela is the only politician of his stature that preaches about oneness, and preaches about avoiding this you do me, I do you politics, preaching about bringing everybody together so that we focus on development. As a development economist, he understands that without a united community or united nation, there will be no development. So he is the one that is going to guarantee peace so that there will be no retribution on either side. Whether he has a coalition with APC, he will make sure APC does not go after the power members of the current government, nor will he allow, if we go into a coalition with the SLPP, he will allow the SLPP to go after members of the APC, because his focus is to get us to focus on development. The people of Sierra Leone are suffering too much, and he is troubled by that. He wants the government to be for the people, by the people, and serve the interests of the people. That's his focus in every negotiation or every discussion he's having.
Let me hold you there. Let me quickly hold you there. I know my panelists in the main studio would love to jump at his right now, but just before I allow them to do so, you know, it's a good thing. Let's go back and listen to some interviews. We were able to put a collection of few interviews Dr. Munkela granted before now, when he was talking about the NGC, why he was running for president, why he's coming into politics. I mean, we got some clips from the BBC, here AYV, Radio Democracy. Let's get to listen to what Dr. Munkela put together as part of his visions, why he was so interested in running for the president.
That I do know that my entrance in the race has caused quite a bit of turbulence, and that is part of what I intended to do, that we needed a new political narrative. We don't have to follow traditional paths. So even the way I campaign on policy. I've been doing public lectures that attract thousands of students, young people, Okada riders, traders, just coming there to say, wow, we've never had town hall meetings in this country. They will see a campaigning style. I can't reveal my tactics here. And that's the beauty of what I'm doing, and that's what I'm used to doing. When I took up the energy agenda of the world, it's one of the most politically sensitive topics in global negotiations. But I tackled it, 10 years, dedicated time, good narrative, good analysis, and I pulled it off. It's the same here. Those who think the voters are stuck, let them go home and rest. Then they leave the platform to us. All I ask, give us freedom. No intimidation. Let us take our message village by village, street by street. Let's see. So for me, that's the beauty. I am ready to challenge the orthodoxy. I am ready to show the kids of this country, the young men and women who need a better future, that yes, you can be part of that change. Let us not accept poverty and the bondage of corruption as our destiny. You can change it, join me. So we will see. Okay, I'll be happy to sit with you in March and say, whoa, I am the new president of the Republic. Number 1 on the 10-point agenda, governance and reducing government waste. The thief we they all call now, they call them thief because we have been writing an article last year called institutionalized leakages, then saying a bookman talk. The thief we they all call now government services now between $60 to $100 million. Thief no more. If we reduce that now boku money we they put in our education and health, automatically. So we'll get for reduce that. But I will get for talk to you long. But if you want to know who the thief, then they come on. Just go to Auditor General and report them. You go see. So that's important, and also accountability. Look at it. So the way forward, I asked Mr. President 2.5 years to go that he gets a realistic reflection about how things are going in the country. People are not happy. He can call the researchers at the Afrobarometer and so on. You need some of these analysts to do a dispassionate analysis for you. When you're in governance, you're in a cocoon. Everybody tells you what you want to hear. Even when something is going wrong, they tell you they rationalize it. And of course, the man is busy. I believe that, he has to do course correction. They take the Auditor General's reports serious. I will appeal to Mr. Speaker as well. Let us debate these issues. If we, 2 leaders of Parliament, are calling for a hearing based on the Constitution to help the government explain, because look, this thing is not going away. Yeah, international media is picking it up. It's denting the image of the country. We got to know the facts. Is it true? What happened? Who authorized?
Right, those were a few clips, a collection of few of the interviews Dr. Yumkela did with us, the BBC, Radio Democracy, and all of that. But also very interesting, the leaked audio. We have to ensure that we bring that to you just before I come to you guys for comments on what JustMed has submitted, and maybe also the submission of Dr. Yumkela in that audio clip. Let's take the leaked audio and then we'll come right back.
They have no clue. I have not shown one sign of weakness. 1 year of pain. 1 year of pain. And the president said, people don't even want to let you grieve. I say, yes, sir. He said, well, don't come back now, we'll talk again. I tell you now, say, I want to talk to you, party. Yes. So if you want to know, yes. President Biyo tell me January and say, I want to talk to me, party. If we are not in there, I will talk to her. No. Yes, that's selfish. He don't make deal for himself. Make deal for himself. Well, for information, I want to retire from politics. But if a neck not be there, if an execution of it, can't talk to your party. That's a selfish man. Come on, give me a break. Well, he left too now. And I continue the discussion with Mr. President. This I tell you openly now. I continue the discussion. What are we discussing? How you unify this country? People like me are brave enough to say, Mr. President, do like Pakaba, unify Salon. The country is hurting. There's pain because of the global crisis as well, and other internal issues. He said, what do you mean by that? I said, for example, what if you get a second time, unify the country, do like Pakaba, a government of national unity? That shows everybody is relevant. We bring all tribes and everybody together. Not so that we stand for. Yes. So Cypher will talk on social media. Another preacher for 7 years. You say it where it matters. Yeah. I'm not craving for power. Yes. I want you to know, all of you, you are in charge of NGC today. You are in charge of NGC today. If fail is succeed now, I don't know the service. Honor and respect. That's your job. But I tell you something, I will continue my dialogue with the head of state about how this country improves, about how we drive agriculture, healthcare, education, infrastructure, and growth and jobs for the youth. I will never stop. Never stop. What we will do, public we will do, and what we will do internal, we'll do it. We'll do it. But these people sick are selling out a party with no information. I'm not interested in a ministerial job. I'm ready to retire from politics. If we are not hearing anything, we are hearing that today. I lost my partner. You know today what I went through last year. You had no clue. I didn't show a sign of weakness. But I'm telling you, you are the owners of NGC today. You will decide the fate. So I'll let on our agenda. First of all, think about your party. Strategic planning of your party. How do you stay alive? How do you sustain yourself? Now some of we, they spend 24/7. You have no clue. Okay. So I've been listening to this writing speech. Now that convention, I go no say, 10 day money not been there for pay lights now by the road. Money not there for print cards. This office today where NGC day. Ambassador that go there. So tell go give una the agreement. Now me list that office there for KKY movement. Not for NGC. 4 or 5 years, now me they pay list $4,000 for that one floor. Now hand out to the party. I call Ibon in America. I say, when I take over now. The list now I am. Ambassador that will change and NGC get. People have no clue. I put a post button. Posting will send $100 to give post on social media. If not to win the party, they die. KKY always can't talk to me now. You know what you don't do? Do you know what it takes to sustain?
Welcome back. The show is AYV on Sunday, and we're discussing the internal problems of the National Grand Coalition Party. I still have on Zoom from the U.S. the Deputy National Leader and Chair of the party, Jesmed Suma. I have Cyril Django, a political economist. I have Professor Emeritus Jimmy Kande and Senior Parliamentary Correspondent Melvin Tijan Mansari. Gentlemen, let me quickly bring you in. You've listened to the submission of Jesmed from the US, talking about, I mean, in fact, they're not struggling. There's no battle for leadership in the NGC, and the NGC is not struggling for its survival. He made mention of that staggering figures of their membership, especially the executives of over 10,000 registered executive members who've been voted in. But with what is happening and with what Dr. Yumkela mentioned in the leaked audio, that even money, I mean, paying for the offices they're occupying has been something from his pockets, about $4,000. And there are people who are just donating $100 and creating some. But what do you make of Cyril? What do you make of Jesmed's submission and with a few of the things Dr. Yumkela mentioned in the clips we've played?
Well, Jesmed seems to have a very tall order. He's doing his best to create a picture of normalcy and decency. But like you said to him, we've seen prominent people resign from the party. And among them is the chairman of that party. So, Mr. Jesmed, let's stop romanticizing this reality. This is a case about one of your main members seemingly confused about how he is going about his political future. As I see it, this is about Dr. Kanye Yumkela's political expediency, his own survival, not necessarily survival of the party. He wants to be president of Sierra Leone. And the problem I see now is that, can he go with the NGC and in what manner? Because President Madabiu is seemingly proving to be a masterclass politician, the man who is throwing spanners in the position. He's used Gambia, in which we saw people, elders, meet Dr. Kanye Yumkela. We saw him invite him to Tihon or so in Bond at a very special occasion of Christmas. We've seen him bombarding this man. Now, this man is to me confused. I want to go to the grand old Sierra Leone People's Party, but I have to take a stand. I have to be rough with his members here, because as we see it, there are elements within the agency who want nothing to do with the grand old parties. They want to build a party, and they want a leader who's ready and willing to go through that building of the party. But there's a man now who is looking at his time. Am I going to spend another 5 years in this kind of scenario? I want to be president. So perhaps this man, Dr. Kande Yumkela, is in a regrets mood. There was, when you did a very good research there, you played for us line by line all of those years of optimism, vibrancy. So one of accepting that I cannot be in this continued position. I have to be relevant, and Sierra Leone is not yet prepared to make a third party relevant. I think I have to take a stand, and anybody in the party who thinks they can stand against me or say something against me, I will be loudmouth on them. So now we're asking, will he take the agency to the Sierra Leone party, or is he going alone? He has to continue to make very critical decisions, because he may not go with the entire party. We've seen fragments of the party. Many people have resigned, and we are now wondering what's next. I am seeing something. You've listened to the tone of KKY. He seemingly resigned that the agency will not make much traction in next election. He has to be smart, and he seems to want to go home, but he will not be going home with Jesmed Suma. He may not be going home with a lot of other, stay behind people in the agency. He would have to go alone.
Why is that?
Because
in the leaked audio that we just played, he talked about how he is leading some people to talk with the president, to talk to the party. So it means there are people, and like I mentioned earlier, rumors, said to unconfirmed, unverified information, should I put it, that there are a few people already that Dr. Yumkela, has taken to meet with the president. So somebody was telling me that even Ambassador Dabo, who he mentioned asked is Ambassador Dabo here? You tell him. So so these are the things at play at the moment. So are you saying Dr. Yumkela is going alone, or Dr. Yumkela has people who share his values with forming that strategic alliance or compact inclusive governance partnership with the SLPP?
Dr. Kande Yumkela will not be going with much of the agency. The agency, as we see it, even though Jesmed is denying, it's in implosion. He wants to be relevant, and the only way you could be relevant in Sierra Leone's politics now is to be a long-term Mandela, or to engage in a strategic alliance where you are absorbed. You, not the party, you are absorbed. And perhaps if President Madabio happens to win the next election, we may see him becoming, closer, maybe a minister, maybe an ambassador. But staying within the agency, he would not be able to build a party that the people of Sierra Leone have not yet accepted as a third force. We are saying.
But if you, for example, you've submitted that Dr. Yumkela wants the presidency.
Clear.
But he cannot get the presidency from the NGC. He can only get that from either the APC or the SLPP. Yes. And now we're seeing that bond with the SLPP. So is it not possible that he would want to get the presidency, and so therefore he would want to go back home?
Well, it's not so easy and clear-cut. When I was listening to the Vice President, Dr. Julie Jallo, he's upped his rhetoric. He's now much more a vibrant politician, perhaps playing on the mind of the presidents, that if you dare intend to bring some of the elements within the party, I am here I am now much more vibrant. So I am really wondering that our man, KKY, is in a major quagmire. Even if he happens to be a member of the Silent People's Party now, it could be the same issue about interest. People who've been there, rain or shine, who will say, you don't go, you won't come back, no, wait. That is going to be his major problem. It is best for him to contest on the NGC, continue his vibrancy, to differentiate himself from the GOPs. But if he's absorbed, he may be
But the NGC,
absorbed.
the NGC, let me bring in Prof. The NGC you have submitted is losing traction. So how can KKY realize his political ambition under the ticket of the NGC? He has to go home, correct?
I think I agree with that premise. KKY is now running as a running mate. I don't think he's interested in being a running mate. He's playing a long game, and that long game is to be president of Sierra Leone. He's a very ambitious brother, and I don't begrudge him. You got to be ambitious if you want to be president. But I want to take Jasmine on a few issues. My friend, old friend Jasmine, we must be living in a parallel universe because I'm on the ground here, and a lot of folks are decamping from the NGC. And I mean, Kande talks about, okay, forming an alliance with the SLPP to move the country forward. I don't think that's the purpose here. SLPP or APC, they've never moved the country forward. So how are they all of a sudden now, because Kande and the NGC are talking to them, they're going to be moving the country forward? It's not about moving the country forward. It is about winning the next election. And that's why the incumbent is trying to draw them closer. And as an incumbent, who will blame him, right? Elections are about numbers. So you want to get as many support. So let's forget this idea about moving the country forward. Because Candace started off about challenging the orthodoxy. And I know many times when I engaged him, it was about changing the trajectory of our country so we can reset our country on a progressive trajectory. I don't see progressivism in either SLPP or APC. NGC may have some elements of that, but even that has dissipated. You know, there may be a few holdovers in the NGC, but let's remember, these were hardened politicians who left the APC and SLPP to come to the NGC. So they didn't just change.
And some had already gone back.
Yeah, so they didn't just change overnight. And Jasmine made another point about how the NGC and Kande are the guarantors of peace. You lost me on that completely. I don't care how well-meaning you are as an individual or a party, as stating stuff or making statements that are supportive of peace does not bring about peace. You got to be doing a whole lot more than that. So to be a guarantor of peace is not just supporting the peace process. You got to be, no party can claim to be a guarantor of peace, you know. Otherwise, we've never been in the doldrums we were in this country. So the calculus really is about the next election. Right. The calculus is not about moving our country forward. So they can sugarcoat, you know, their politics all they want, but it's not really. I don't get the sense of a vision in the NGC. I mean, I supported them because I believed in Kande, not because I thought he was, you know, going to be a radical or anything like that. He's a pragmatist. It's like Barack Obama. If he wanted a progressive, Barack Obama will never have won an election. He's a centrist. He had to appeal to all kinds of factions. And that's how I see Kande. Right? I don't begrudge him from going back to whatever party he wants to, because he's convinced that he's not going to be able to win an election as an NGC flag bearer. You know, the last election bore that out, and I think they will perform even worse this time around than they did in the last election. So the calculus is very clear to me.
But do you see him or the NGC playing the role of a kingmaker in the June 24th multi-tier elections?
It depends if there's a runoff. Or maybe he can campaign for one particular candidate. It depends again on how many people he can bring along with him. Because there one thing I need to also underscore: a lot of young Sierra Leoneans are disappointed in the NGC. They pin their hope on the NGC and Kande, even though they didn't do well. They saw him as a different politician, rightly or wrongly. And recently, all I've been hearing has been really negative. You know, I tried to assure them, you give the man a chance. You know, he has the right to go to whatever party he wants
this a case of saying, I mean, if you want to make a change, you cannot do that from the outside?
Well, you can make that point, but how do you make progressive changes from within these two entrenched, you know, patronage networks? What we have here is competitive neo-patrimonialism. When these parties are in power, they govern the same way. So unless you want to challenge the patterns of governance in this country, you cannot be a progressive. You know, so, I mean, that's where, you know, Kande loses me. You know, as far as, yes, you can make the argument for me that you're joining the SLPP because you think that's your best chance, you know, to win the presidency when BO is out. And I can buy that argument because I think that's the real argument. But to say you go in there to see how you can move the country forward, yes, maybe at the margins. You may work on some projects in energy and other areas that can lift the country out of the problems that we're facing right now. But we face a party curse in this country. We're cursed by these two political parties. That's why some of us have always supported a third party. And it's becoming clearer that the mindset of Sierra Leoneans, they're not ready for a third party. And you don't blame it on the Sierra Leoneans as much as on the politicians who manipulate the cultural differences among our people. And you know why they do that? They do that so as to fragment resistance to bad governance and corruption. Because once we're not united, we're not going to take on these parties on issues of bad governance or corruption. Because as long as it's our own SOB in power, we're satisfied with that.
Let me quickly run you through a few things. I'm pretty sure you must have assessed and you must have been able to identify perhaps factors responsible for why we're not having a strong or sustainable third force in the political space. So we go back, we saw the likes of Kerifa Smart with the Tijan Kaba era. Fast forward, we saw the Charles Magai, the PMDC, People's Movement for Democratic Change, where that, is now, it's another topic. We saw the UDM, Mohamed Bangoura again, another factor coming in. We saw the NGC, the C4C, and so it appears that to have a sustained effort in creating a change with a third force is almost impossible in the political arena of Sierra Leone. Have we been able to identify, especially with that breath of fresh hope when Dr. Yumkela and the NGC came into force? Those who are perceived to be enlightened, realized at the time that, I think this is what we need now to break the chain. So a point Dr. Yumkela, referred to the SLPP and APC as Alusan and Alassane, twin brothers who have destroyed, who have held this country to ransom for since independence. So what is really, what are the factors responsible for the state of affairs, especially with regards to third force?
That's a good question. I think you begin to answer that question by asking, what is it that differentiates voters? Voters are usually differentiated on the basis of ideology. You can vote for your party because there are ideological differences. We don't have that in Sierra Leone. There's not much ideological distance between APC and SLPP. You can vote for a party on the basis of the program, that they present, their manifesto. You can vote for a party because maybe it's a mass-based party. They are what you might call not an elitist party, they're mass-based, so you attract the masses. So they have a class dimension to their membership and appeal. We don't have that here. The APC may have started that way, when Ibrahim Taki and others were members of the APC, but they lost their way a long time ago in the 60s. Now, the only thing now that left to differentiate voters and politicians is ethnicity and ethno-regionalism. And that's when you get into the weeds of false consciousness, because you begin to vote for a candidate on the basis of an ideology that is antagonistic to your interest, while the politician is manipulating you to vote for him, even or her, even though they don't really subscribe, to what you're trying to get them to do for your community. So I think the reason why it's difficult for a third party to break through is because the parties are ethnic outfits, ethno-regional outfits, and the country is ethnically polarized, so that one political party has a base in the east and south, and it's very difficult to dislodge them from there. Another party has a base in the west and the north, and it's very difficult to dislodge them from there. Now, if you go back to the parties that made some inroads, right, the UNPP got most of their support from the APC. It was the same ethno-regional base. These were defectors from the APC at a time when the APC was at its very, very low. They could not, I think they only had about 5% of the popular vote in 1996. So there was a lot of decamping, from the APC at the time. So Carifa Smart was the beneficiary of that, another personalist outfit. Now you go to the PDP, Sobe. He joined an alliance with the SLPP, but that was another remnant of the APC. They still had the same base. Now, all the PDP and UNPP guys, they've regrouped. They kind of ingathered again in the APC. You go to the PMDC and the NGC, they're also personalist outfits. And they didn't go long. They don't last for more than an election or two. And the idea about a party, if you want to build a party, you're not just looking at elections. That's not when you mobilize your supporters. You work more during elections. And I did not see the NGC doing that. Maybe Jesmed will tell us that the NGC was busy all along. We were not just noticing what is going on. But I think we'll have noticed on the ground. There will not have been such a hemorrhaging of membership if the NGC had been doing well. So going back to your question, which I think is very pertinent, that the ethno-regional character of our politics, the fact that our political parties are based on these ethnic regions, they are ethno-regionally based, that tends to subscribe to the persistence of this duopoly in our country, or having the dominance of two political parties. You may have an individual who rises up in one of these parties. That's our best hope for a reformer to emerge in one of these parties and say, damn what has been going on, we're going to reset our country on a more. But that has not happened yet, because the way these parties are set up, it's very difficult for a reformer to emerge in these parties. They are a bunch of stand-patters and reactionaries.
Right. Melvin, let me hear you on the submission from Jesmed and the clips we've played from Dr. Yumkela. But more fundamentally, what do you think is really responsible for what is happening in the political arena? Are we seeing a situation where perhaps a strategic a model is being devised by the two political parties? I mean, as Professor put it, that's entrenched duopoly of the APC and the SLPP. So just always keep dominating the space. So, and of course, if a new party comes, it must be a disgruntled person from one of these two outfits, forming that as a way of registering their grievances or showing that they are not happy with the system. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's always a compromise. Either you go back or you join the other. What is happening?
Well, I think Doc has said it all. The political culture itself is not tolerant to third forces. Even our political psyche, you will hear people tell you that it's either APC or SLPP. And that cannot be blamed entirely on the electorate itself. If you look at the nature of our democracy, we're still fledgling, we are still young with this thing called democracy. If you take a look at places like the West, I was like shocked. The US, they had to vote, is it 8 or 9 times to get a speaker? And it was basically as a result of rebel leaders from these two grand political parties in the US. So for me, I think our political culture, we must advance. We must see past what is being given to us by the political class, particularly the APC and the SLPP. And unfortunately, Dr. Yumkela was seemingly an embodiment of that change that many people were expecting to at least progressively be introduced into our culture. But unfortunately, that is seemingly not the case. With regards to Jesmed, and like Doc said, perhaps it's because he's far off. He's seemingly out of common touch. And it's very important in politics to have a grasp of the common touch. If you look at events in the NGC, No sober-minded NGCer will tell you that things are stable in that party. Even if you listen to the audio of Dr. Yumkela, he is fundamentally addressing a disagreement within the rank and file of his party. If you read the Salon Force publication, they're telling you that there was a disagreement. Only that we don't know, firstly, who are those persons that are pushing for this coalition or alliance? What is their endgame possibility? Is Dr. Yumkela going to deliver Cambia for the SLPP? What is this pact? What is the Union Pact itself all about? For once, we are getting an idea that Dr. Yumkela is saying he wants to tell the president to unify the country. But he had an opportunity 4.5 years ago to do so. So what is so unique? And I'll agree, it's not about national change. It's about personal fights for relevance among persons, particularly within the NGC. And for me, just before wrapping up, I think Doc has already explained most of the things I have said. If you look at pattern, the recent by-elections, because we are to ask, if they are forming an alliance, what is the NGC bringing to the table? Or what is Dr. Yumkela bringing to the table? So let's look at the pattern of by-elections and ask ourselves, what has been the performance of the NGC? That will give us a grasp as to its electorate strength since 2018. And also personality of Honorable Yumkela and what he is bringing to the table, if indeed, and this word it's quite important, he is yet to confirm that he has formed an alliance with the SLPP.
He's in talks. That is very clear. That is what he said.
So the process is progressive. What if it's collapse? What if public pressure and some of this kind of conversation cause a U-turn in the whole conversation? So we should not be, I think we should be circumspect.
You know, they met in Tingwoon in Bonn, and the statement was made, I mean, jokingly, that if Honorable Dr. Yumkela decide for contest against President Madabiyo with a kidnapper, and he was laughing at that statement. Maybe that was just a hint that, I think we're getting an agreement that he might not be a presidential candidate in the...
Well, if you read Dr. Bright's resignation letter, there was one, I think the second to last paragraph, in which he gave some conjectures around political intimidation. His family has been getting restless nights and in fear for his life. So we don't know, could there be some personal threats? Could there be some intimidation tactics or some sorts of behind-the-scene meandering, persuading them at all costs? We cannot tell. But there is one thing that we can tell, that the hands of the SLPP cannot be far away from what is happening in the NGC, and it's for the obvious reason. So for me, moving forward, I think we must grow in our democratic culture. But where will that notion of political centrism be placed with all of these developments? Mind you, it's always left and right. And our political culture is still coming into terms of, do we need centrists in our politics? I think yes.
Because this political culture, perhaps Prof can also have a bite on this. This political culture we keep talking about in Sierra Leone, is it a modeled one for the nation, or is it one that we just borrowed? Because while I'm asking this question, I covered the midterms in the US. And I had the opportunity to talk to some powerful politicians. I mean, why do they give who they give symbols for, to be governor, to be senator, and all of that? And for them, it's not necessarily about the color or the party you belong. You as an individual must have the competence to, even first off, say 70-80%, you must be able to deliver the seat based on your conviction, based on your ideology. And then the party, if that fits within the party, then you become a candidate depending on the primary. So this political culture we talk about in Sierra Leone, is it one that we've been able to model ourselves, or one that we just borrow and say, let's implement and let's see where this takes us?
I think it's one that is still under construct. It is still under construct, for the fact that if you look at the democratic space itself, take a look at the coups, take a look at the state of military intervention and bad governance, take a look at the breakdown in the democratization process itself. Globally, there's this conversation that democracy itself is suffering from fatigue. So we should not see it as something differently here. All that, when people have, given us a blueprint as to what kind of change they want for the nation, and that blueprint is being thrashed for personal achievements or aggrandizement, then it becomes a source for conversation. So for me, the political culture here is what kind of model we want to use to develop Sierra Leone. Are the political parties having the ideologies to move Sierra Leone forward?
Quickly, Prof.
Yeah, just briefly here. I think political culture is dynamic. It's not static. It changes. It references our attitudes. It has a behavioral index and an orientation index. It speaks to our political orientation and our political adaptation and behavior. Now, what is holding back the development of our political culture is our low level of material development. Because as we develop economically, it's going to create a social transformation, a transformation not only in the structure, but also in our culture. So what is holding us back really is material development. As our country develops, the cleavages that we're dealing with will tend to cross-cut. So your ethnicity will not determine your political loyalty, your choices, or even your class location in society. They will cross-cut so that you and I may be Timony, but guess what? Our class location may be different, and our political loyalties are different because we're educated, we are more, informed, and so forth. So the culture is static now, and this culture that we have tends to be supportive of a very decadent political system. I think.
Yes, quickly.
Now, talking about political culture, we don't need that in Sierra Leone.
Why?
Because the Grand parties are convenient with the structural nature of politics, such that the north and western area are exclusively for one side, and those parties are dependent on that exclusive reserved votes. The south and the southeast are also having reserved votes. So what the hell? You put a chicken now on another party, people will vote for them because they feel aligned to the regions. So surely there is no need for a political culture where...
But what would you say to, for example, we've seen in this country that no political party, be the APC or the SIPP, winning a national election with just the support of, their tribal kingsmen. You have to go beyond your base, beyond your clans. So,
well, exactly, Samuel. That is exactly the issue with the agency. There has to be a political base to serve as your political culture. The agency does not have that base, and perhaps the calculation of Kande Yomkela is that I don't have a base where I can rely on. I have to have a base, and I have to align myself with the Grand Old Sierra Leone Party. So that issue of a base is a major impediment that is confronting the agency, without which there is no chance for it in any polls. And so, to be fair to Dr. Kande Yomkela, he wants to be relevant in the political scene. And he has to take difficult decisions. He has to jump the train and, of course, join the Sierra Leone People's Party to maintain that relevance. Perhaps not as a vice presidential candidate, because it's not possible by way of the rules there. But perhaps the next election, when there will be open primaries, there perhaps we could see him come as strong candidates to contest under that party.
All right, let me move over to Jesmed Suma there. Jesmed, you've listened to what the panelists here have submitted. What would you say in terms of what is really responsible for not having a sustainable third force? Perhaps you can get that for a year to elections or a year after elections, and at the end of the day, we're seeing retrogression, we're seeing a demise of the third forces we've had in this country, and now the NGC.
Let me first of all address the issue about a leadership crisis that was referenced in one of the discussion. What do you consider a crisis? Is when a vacuum is created and there is a problem within the structure of that particular institution to fill that vacuum. We do not have that problem. Every vacuum that has been created, we have a backup plan to fill them up. And that is why I'm here as deputy chairman and leader of the party. So we don't have that leadership crisis. We've had the issue about membership. I know Professor Kande has mentioned that he is on the ground I have been to, I was just coming from Sierra Leone a few weeks ago, about a month or two ago. No, but less than 2 months ago. So I've been to Sierra Leone like 4 or 5 times. I was the national organizing secretary that organized and recruited Sierra Leoneans across the board that led to the lower level election. So I know when I talk about numbers, I'm talking it from reality. Talking to few students here and there, give their opinion, it does not tell you the actual structures that happens within the different villages and the districts that we are operating with. Now, with respect to your question, as regards why third parties do not get traction, Professor Kande has mentioned a few, but let me respond to that in relation to the NGC. There are 4 main fundamental reasons. The first one has to do with the fact that the people that actually leads to the formation of a third party usually emanate from the 2 rotten political parties, and bringing with them the same baggage that they were participating in the previous political parties. It's the same thing with the NGC. But fortunately with the NGC, our situation is not a traditional politician, as you may know it, that existed within the politics of Sierra Leone for the past 20, 30 years and become endemic within the system. So that's one advantage that we have. The person that led the formation of the NGC party, Dr. Kande Koleoyemi-Kela, is not a traditional politician as we know them in Sierra Leone. The second one, the political parties that exist, APC and SLPP, they have no ideological difference. So when you want to campaign or you want to sell your party, most third parties that come do not have any ideological principle upon which they stand. That is not the case with the NGC. NGC is defined as a nationalist progressive political party. Our principles are focused on nation building and Salone first. And that has been the mantra that guides the leadership of our party. Now, the only exception that we have with the only shortcoming that we have, the leadership of our party has been diplomatic in their approach. And you cannot bring diplomacy in African politics. There has to be some level of radicalism. And sooner or later, that process is going to change with our party, because we are a political party in opposition. We have to be prepared and ready to stand up to defend and protect the interests of the people of Sierra Leone at any time, irrespective of whoever is affected, and protect the constitution of the nation. That level of diplomacy has been part of the concerned challenges that we've been facing over the past years. Now, the fourth one is because the internal structures of the current political parties, they are unaccountable, they are undemocratic, and they are not responsive to their members. You have a few people within the hierarchy of the party that dictate how those parties operate, such that if you come from outside and become a member of those 2 parties, APC and SLPP, you want to come to the leadership, you have to actually, you have to actually be part and parcel of the corrupt system for you to get to the leadership. In the NGC, our internal structures is so democratic that even Dr. Kande Koleoyemi-Kela, for him to have the mandate to form a committee to negotiate for and on behalf of the NGC party in any potential alliance, he had to come to the National Executive Committee for him to get that mandate. That is not the case with APC and SLPP. We have a few people who just decide, okay, let's go. That's why PMDC failed. That's why PDP failed. That's why the other political parties failed, because it's a one-man show. In NGC, that's not the case. We have a structure. We have a constitutional mandated organs of the party that are the center of the structural power of the party, and that's why Kande had to come to us to have that mandate.
From your submission, let me quickly pick a question or two from what you've submitted. So one of the reasons why, according to you, why third forces are not being kept alive in Sierra Leone is that those who form those political parties come from the 2 rotten political parties of APC and SLPP. And of course, the NGC is no different, because Dr. Koleoyemi-Kela is coming from the SLPP. But if these political parties are rotten, in your words, Why trying to form an alliance with them? Why not keep on the path that leads to the change you've been preaching? Why trying to form an alliance with any of them? Either the APC that you were working towards forming an alliance with under the COP arrangement, or now the SLPP that you're saying Dr. Yumkela has been mandated by the party to lead that process of negotiation?
Thank you for asking that question. Now, the key is this. Our party has been consistent on its country-first ideology and principle. And we have advocated for the interests of the people of Sierra Leone right through these years. It may be diplomatic in the eyes of some. Some people may want it to be more radical than our approach, but our approach has been successful so far. So if those who we criticize try to align their own vision in line with our own principle, then there is reason for us to be open to have discussion with them. I will give you an example. Nelson Mandela was locked up for 26 years, criticizing the apartheid government of South Africa. But when the apartheid government decided to align their vision for South Africa in line with Nelson Mandela's vision, he came out of jail and sat and negotiated with them. Some people that are saying we should not speak with the Madabio government, if they were in Nelson Mandela's position, South Africa will still be under apartheid. So a leader has to have clarity of vision, just like Dr. Kande Yumkela has clarity of vision. That clarity of vision, as long as guides you in your approach to leadership, you should be able to have negotiation with anyone, anybody, as long as it leads to the development of the lives and the standard of living of our people. So some people, they are idealistic in their thinking. Some of us are pragmatic and realist. That's the big difference. You can be idealistic to a limited extent, but when reality sinks in, you have to be realistic and pragmatic as long as you don't deviate from your principles. And that's exactly what Dr. Kande Yumkela is doing.
Also, when you talk about democracy and how democratic the NGC is, and everything has to go in a democratic way. But that democracy you're talking about in the NGC has been questioned, even by Cyril Django here. I mean, who was competing for the ticket of the mayoral race in the NGC, saying the argument was, they are for way to Logi Samuel Itham this position. Who represented you?
Let me good. That's a very good point. In 2018,
so is that not been questioned? In 2018, democracy you're talking about?
Yeah, in 2018, our party had limited time to plan for the election. And that was by construct. That was exactly what Anes Koma wanted. He delayed everything, dragged us into so many issues, just to a point that we cannot be able to compete or plan ourselves to compete. So in such a situation, one has to take certain drastic decisions to ensure that we're able to participate. Now, in elections, two things have to be, two things have to be possible. One, the popularity of the candidate to be able to pull crowd. Two, they has to be able to fund his campaign. There are many who came to NGC. They wanted to run on the NGC ticket, but they were relying on NGC to pay their membership, their registration fee with NEC, to finance their campaign, to do everything for them when they don't have a dime to run their campaign. And then they expect NGC to endorse them to run on the NGC ticket. That, it's kind of a little challenging. Now, currently, we have a system that we have put in place in which people are not going to be representative of the party based on their own perception of popularity. We will have to show evidence of popularity. So there are two options. One, if you say you're popular, then show us the recruitment numbers you have recruited for the party. We have numbers you have to reach. When you reach those targets, those people that you think you are popular to, it will be easy for you to go tell them, come follow me to the NGC, I want to become their candidate. And you can get them registered. Once you show those numbers, we have funding to fund your campaign for you to run on behalf of the NGC party. So it's not going to be like 2018. This, with respect to that comment that you mentioned, when Dr. Kande Kolayumeka talked about the 4,000, that was like 4 or 5 years ago. We are talking about 4 or 5 years ago when the office was initially established. There was nowhere for us to get money from. So he was the one dishing out of his pocket to pay for the office before he handed it over to us. We're not talking about now when we have structures. We have 10,800 executives across the nation. We have people in the diaspora. That's not the situation we have right now.
All right. Continue to stay there with us, Jesmed. Quickly, I'll come back to you as we try to wrap up the program. But let me quickly allow you respond to Jesmed as we the way forward.
Popularity. How best, Jesmed, would you determine someone's popularity without having a primary? Let's just be very fair. When you want to determine somebody's popularity and his relevance, you have to go through the democracy you're talking about there, which is that there has to be primaries where the people themselves in the party choose who is the most popular. What I'm saying, he's saying is that as a party, we want money. We want a candidate who comes on with money. How different are you then from the other parties? It should be the reason why...
Have you resigned from the NGC?
Well, I'm not even interested in the NGC because I do not believe in a party where you do not allow for primaries.
Are you still a registered member of the party?
Well, I'm not even a member of the party because I am tired with the where. In fact, there's not much difference really because you're talking about women being harassed, bodyguards being fighting people with violence. That for me does not define the kind of party we should have in this country. But however, we only have to have one solution,
which is
a third force that has not got a base is a failure. So it's either one of the two, you toss a coin and it drops A for this party, B for this party, and you join them. But for you to have a third force without a political base, it's an illusion.
Prof, as we try to wrap up the program, I mean, looking at all the happenings, what would you consider the informative way forward to ensuring that these political parties who appear to be third forces see themselves as integral component within the governance structure of politics and governance in the country?
Okay. Just one comment on what Jesmed said, and I'll get to your question. I think Jesmed is trying to muddy the waters a little bit by bringing in Mandela. Mandela never joined the Apartheid National Party. He negotiated with them to bring an end to apartheid, right? He wanted a rainbow nation, but he never joined the Volksstaat, which we're calling for a separate, apartheid state. He never joined the National Party. He didn't join an alliance. Yes, de Klerk became first vice president, but even didn't last long. Even Buthelezi was brought in, briefly. So that was a different situation. You wanted a softer landing for apartheid, and that was what was behind many of those give and take. Now, on the question of the reformatory way forward, and how third parties can try to cultivate a political base in this country, I think they should transcend ethnicity. They should transcend ethno-regionalism and pursue a more emancipatory project that is rooted in class, not ethnicity. Because class and ethnicity are the two most important, basis of social cleavage in our society. Religion is not as important, right? A basis of social cleavage. But the problem is that ethnicity trumps class. And it stifles the development of the kind of consciousness among subaltern Sierra Leoneans that can catapult a third party to power. That's how the APC started. They mobilized, the underclass. Shekhar Stevens and others, they were populists, mobilizing the underclass. So if we have a party, I mean, again, there's no guarantee it might work, but with, levels of material development improving, and we have a more class-based party, you can't do the ethno-regional thing. That's already been cornered by the APC and the SLPP. But as societies become more developed, you can appeal to the independents and also have a grassroots, class-based, underclass, subaltern base of support for your party. And I think that's the only way a third party might move, the country forward or capture the imagination of Sierra Leoneans, particularly appealing to the young. But also being able to capture people in the rural areas, people who have been left out, the downtrodden, the forgotten. Those are the types that you need to really mobilize and politicize and raise their level of political consciousness to challenge the orthodoxy. You don't challenge the orthodoxy by joining the orthodoxy. And that's not the only point I have to make. Really.
All right, Melvin? Yeah. How do we lay the tracks for a sustainable third force that can actually challenge the status quo?
I think we need political consistency, and we need persons with, well, I would say integrity to be involved in politics, because it's all boils to, yes, you have your agenda, but it boils to the person and what their personal political beliefs are. And unless we go to that level for people to see that it's not necessarily when you join the SLPP that you will make change, or when you join the APC that you will make change, then we'll begin to see the bigger picture. But again, the electorate itself, we must make up our mind and ask ourselves, what kind of government do we want? Do we want governments year in, 5 years out, that comes in and go without delivering on their promises, and yet still people are calling them progressive governments? Is that progression? So for me, yes, we'll have time to cut corners on this one. We'll have time to reform if the need be. But there is this pressure coming from first and second forces, also on third forces, that we are seeing clearly now that is causing their disappearances. So we need serious consistency by our politicians, and of course the electorate. We must ask ourselves, are we practicing issue-based politics, or the traditional style of politics that talks about tribe, region, and all those variances? Unless we see the bigger picture, which is the national development, diverse of persons, diverse of those trivialities that we always anchor ourselves in, I'm afraid. But yet still we have a lot of time to go. And yes, democracy is a process. It's not static. It's not an event, and we'll get there if our leaders play by the rules and they become more consistent in what they've preached and what they are doing.
Quickly, the issue of not having a political base is also a factor being highlighted by two of the panelists here for the NGC. Is that something you're considering as we wrap up?
Now, our party is not a tribal or controlled by any specific tribe, nor is it controlled by any specific region. Our political base is across the nation. It may be embryonic it may be in an embryonic stage for now, but eventually, as we are trying to build it, our base is nationwide. It's going to be comprising of people of like minds that believe in the progressive principles and values of the party, and that's why we focus on our values and our principles across the nation, from east, west, north, south, and central of the nation. And that's how we are trying to build our base. We have to remember, NGC has just existed for 5 years, or 6 years the most, compared to political parties that have existed for over 50 years. So you're comparing a 60-year-old party with a 5-6-year-old party? Come on, guys. You guys give us credit, man. At least we are creating traction within the nation.
What is the party doing now? What is the party doing now to solve the problems? Are you going after those who have resigned already to see how you can find a way to bring them back to the party?
You see, our party value each and every member of our party. There may be difference, and some of those people, some maybe may overreact because of their differences with some of the issues that may have. That happens in any organization. That's why I have not assumed the title acting chairman, because we still believe that Dr. Dennis Bright is our chairman and leader. The party leadership has not accepted his resignation. So we are solving this issue internally. It's a family affair. So we're going to address it with time.
Thank you very much, Jesmed F. Suma, Deputy National Chairman and leader of the National Grand Coalition Party. It's been a pleasure having you there, Jesmed. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you very much, Melvin Tijan Mansai. But just quickly, Prof, I just have, just out of curiosity, this question perhaps that you would use 30 seconds or a minute to respond to. Do you see the June 24th multi-tier elections ending in a fascinating outcome that gives hope to Sierra Leone and Sierra Leoneans?
You're speaking to a very disillusioned compatriot. I must, first concede. I think the next election is going to be a choiceless election. Right? You may ask why I say that, because there are many, if you're not into ethno-regional politics, right, SLPP, APC, you're going to find it very difficult to choose between these political parties. So that's what makes it a choiceless election, not that a choice will not be made. It becomes also choiceless in the sense that once you elect the new guy, nothing is really going to change. I think since Kaba, much has not changed in this country. I think governance saw some slight improvement under Kaba, because Kaba was the most inclusive of the last 3 presidents. Some SLPP types tried to even deny him the flag bearership in
2018?
No, it was Kaba
1996 and 2002.
Yeah, 2002. They tried to deny him the flag bearership then because he was not catering to the Southerners at that time. But he rose up above that ethno-regionalism. That's why he was able to win Koinadugu and Cambia in the 2002 election. He won a landslide. Showed the way that you can rise above, ethno-regionalism. He had some problems in his second term, but I really believe that the way forward in this country, elections are not going to bring about radical change at all, not through the ballot box. And the hope is that someday the ballot box will bring about that change, but we have to continue to have faith in the ballot box and the mechanism should work, because when people lose faith in the electoral mechanism, that's when everything goes awry. Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor Jimmy Kande. Quickly, since I see your issue.
Like Professor said here, June 24th is a very good date, but the vibrancy, why should I be going to vote? That is not. It's not there. The policies, the people who are going to come forward.
Is it because of we do not know those who would be, vying for the presidency, and we've not gotten manifestos?
Well, we're looking for now
the policies being submitted.
Who's going to be the flag bearer in the APC? Right. That's what is going to determine whether there will be vibrancy in next elections. All
right. Already we know a flag bearer. That is Julius Madabu, based on the constitution of the SLPP. He's the leader and automatically the flag bearer of the SLPP. So he's known and already it's been sold to the people already. So thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure having all 3 of you here tonight. This is where we end tonight's program. A very big thank you to all of our panelists who honored our invitation and be part of the conversation. Also, many thanks to you, our viewers and listeners, and we do apologize for not going through hundreds of your messages. It would have been a daunting task for me if I had made an attempt to have gone through some of them, because they were more political. So those of you who sent messages that are tailored to the issues discussed and I did not read them, I apologize for that. Up next is our AYV Primetime News. The show has been AYV on Sunday. My name is Samuel Wise-Bangrasin. Enjoy the rest of your night. Bye-bye.